Oh boy, it feels like I've been asleep for, how long? Asleep for 5 days. Yeah, sorry about that. While I slept, Biden's 2022 State of the Union went down, and I want to talk about it a little bit. For those of you not in the know, somehow, the yearly State of the Union comes from Article 2, Section 3, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution. The President shall, from time to time, give to the Congress information of the State of the Union, and recommend to their consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. Notice that it says from time to time and not yearly, but at this point it's become traditional that the State of the Union speech happened once a year, generally sometime in the first couple of months. Some notes of the first State of the Union from 1790 still survive, but for over a century, until 1913, the State of the Union was a written letter read off by a clerk, not a speech. As Americans, being reasonably anti-monarchy in their sentiment, tried to distance themselves from the similarly purposed British tradition, the speech from the throne. But when radio became the next big thing, people recognized the value in actually hearing the president speak. And so, it's become a broadcast event ever since, transitioning to TV and later internet streaming. I'm providing this context to make a point. Despite that anti-monarch sentiment that the Americans are attached to, there's still a lot of pomp and ceremony surrounding the State of the Union. A certain level of decorum is expected during the event, more so than a normal day in the House. Every time you watch a State of the Union and there's a large pause in the speech, and there's like 30 seconds of applause, yeah, it drags out what should be a half-hour talk to sometimes over an hour. But the spectacle of it is the point. On the Wikipedia page for the State of the Union, a passage regarding the applause reads as follows. The applause is often political in tone, with many portions of the speech being applauded only by members of the president's own party. As non-political office holders, members of the Supreme Court or the Joint Chiefs of Staff rarely applaud in order to retain the appearance of political impartiality. In recent years, the presiding officers of the House and the Senate, the Speaker and the Vice President respectively, have departed from the neutrality expected of the presiding officers of deliberative bodies, as they too stand and applaud in response to the remarks of the President with which they agree. Citation needed. Well, while I was in my, recent malaise, I decided to challenge this citation needed and see for myself by watching past State of the Unions. A lot of past State of the Unions. Sometimes I wish my brain would allow me to work on things properly, you know? A consistent thing in older State of the Unions is that everybody applauds when the president first comes in. Doesn't matter whether it's your party's guy or the other party's, including, generally, those presiding officers who were expected to maintain some impartiality. But historically, after that, they actually didn't applaud during the speech when the crowd did. Here's the reason for that. Behind the president to the left is the vice president, who's the senior officer of the Senate, and to the right is the speaker, the senior officer of the House. The American system's three branches, executive, judicial, and legislative, are on some level set up to be at odds with each other. No one branch wields all the power, and they are often combative. This is why when the State of the Union happens, the president must be formally invited by the legislative branch to give his report. Congress is not the house of the president, he is a guest there, and those who preside over that house, those senior officers, do so as the hosts of the president. It's therefore reasonable that there would be an expectation of them to remain neutral parties, especially if they may disagree with the president politically. And a lot of the older State of the Union speeches bear this out. It's pretty consistent for the guys behind the president not to applaud. In 1960, when Eisenhower was president, they didn't so much as budge. The applause was shorter too, which certainly helped the time pass.
With our side committed to its own protection and against aggression by the other.
Also, that's a baby Nixon back there. What a cute little guy. Under Kennedy and Johnson, same thing. Those guys aren't moving. When Nixon finally became president himself, there's a weird framing with at least his first State of the Union. The camera rarely moves off of his face, except for room-wide shots. But occasionally, you can actually see clapping from his VP in the background. It's not common. It's certainly not after every single sentence, but it happens once in a while. I'm not surprised that the first break from decorum, even if slightly, began with Nixon. Nixon's later State of the Unions saw more applause from the VP, but still none from the Speaker of the House. I would guess that the rationalization for this was that the VP is both the senior Senate officer, but also part of the executive branch, so whatever. Gerald Ford continued the weird head-only framing, and I couldn't tell how often his VP applauded, but frankly he didn't get much applause anyway. Not surprising. Jimmy Carter's VP applauded regularly. Reagan brought something virtually unknown to the State of the Union. Audience laughter to his jokes, also not surprising, but this was also the point when the Speaker of the House started applauding in the background too. Every president after Reagan, regardless of political party, had both the VP and the Speaker applaud, with them beginning to stand to applaud under Bush Sr., while the applause from the crowd gets longer and louder. The speeches back in the day were between half an hour and 45 minutes, generally. In the modern era, they're regularly an hour long, and the speeches themselves aren't actually longer, it's all that clapping. However, the first time the State of the Union actually turned into a shit show, where the rules of decorum weren't breached politely with some applause, but instead with a direct rebuke, was President Barack Obama, 2009.
There are also those who claim that our reform efforts would ensure illegal immigrants. This too is false. The reforms I'm proposing would not apply to those who are here illegally. It's not true.
That's Republican Congressman Joe Wilson shouting, "You lie," to Obama's claim about Obamacare not covering illegal immigrants, an act that was condemned by the entirety of the House, regardless of political party, and which Wilson would later apologize for. Look at their shocked expressions. Obama wants to respond to the heckler, but stops himself. Joe Biden looks over with disdain, and then shakes his head in embarrassment and disgrace. Nancy Pelosi looks shocked, like, did somebody actually just do that during the State of the Union? Keep Pelosi's reaction in mind for later. It's going to be hilarious considering what comes next. Only one Republican would actually outright refuse to attend any of Obama's various State of the Unions over the years, but other party members would repeatedly break convention in other ways. They would scoff, groan, and heckle the president during his speeches, though never quite reaching the level of Wilson's infamous "you lie" moment. However, when Trump got elected, the Democrats would take this new precedent set by the Republicans and turn it up to 11. Trump's 2018 State of the Union. The Republicans controlled the House, the Senate, the presidency, and the Supreme Court tilted right after the appointment of Neil Gorsuch? I don't know how. This guy. Everything was in the Republicans' hands, and the Democrats, throwing a tantrum far beyond Wilson's "you lie" moment, would let everybody know how they felt about it. When Trump first entered the chamber, they didn't rise from their seats for the first time in history, wheelchair-bound people notwithstanding, disrespecting the precedent that one stands out of respect for the office of the presidency, not necessarily the president himself. They turned their backs on Trump as he walked towards the podium, a component of the pre-speech where normally the president shakes hands as the House applauds his approach. They heckled him and made faces to the cameras, and a larger number of them simply refused to attend. Even as Trump reported good news, economic upswings, companies creating jobs, lowered unemployment, the Democrats sat there sulking for the world to see. I'm sure Starbucks-sipping university students thought this was praxis, insulting Trump right to his face during what Americans consider to be the most sanctified event, while the rest of the world watched, but most people just thought it was petty. And in 2020, when Nancy Pelosi was back in the speaker's chair again, she infamously ripped up her copy of Trump's speech after he had given it, right on camera. A far cry from the woman who, 11 years earlier, expressed such shock at somebody who would dare to heckle the president during the State of the Union. It took a concentrated effort from both Republicans and Democrats for several decades, but we're at the end result now. The State of the Union is no longer viewed as a moment of necessary needed unity between disparate political factions, who occasionally need to be reminded that they are, in the end, on the same team as Americans. Now it's just another speech, where the guy in charge has his cronies play him up and his detractors publicly shit on him. At least it's more blatantly that now than it ever was before. I think it's interesting to note, though, that when the really serious instances of disunity began, it was because, on the Republican side, they had convinced themselves that Obama was not a real American, and therefore they didn't need to unite with an anti-American faction. Meanwhile, on the Democratic side, as global citizens, they no longer care about American as an identity, certainly not enough to unite towards it. Which is why when I watched the recent State of the Union by President Biden, we're finally back here, I thought this initial introduction was ridiculous to hear.
And Savannah, this could be a rare moment of bipartisanship. He's hoping the kind that he remembers, bipartisanship, politics stopping at the water's edge on foreign policy.
Now you're asking for bipartisanship? After everything that's happened, and both sides are to blame here, but after all the shit everyone's pulled, now that you hold all the chips the way that the Republicans did in 2018, now you want bipartisanship. Now you want unity, which in this case means everybody just comes under your banner and follows your direction? You didn't have this reconciliatory tone back when Trump was giving these speeches. One of President Kennedy's most famous quotes is, "You cannot negotiate with people who say what's mine is mine and what's yours is negotiable. You cannot call for unity under your banner when you hold all the cards, claiming that it's somehow neutral, while when the pendulum has swung the other way, you kick and scream and screech that it's just not fair. That's not what neutrality is. That's not how this works." The speech itself, the one that Biden gave, to be honest, it was just so-so. There was some good stuff in there. And I don't just mean the bits that he blatantly took from Trump's agenda, like the whole manufacture in America thing.
That means make more cars and semiconductors in America, more infrastructure and innovation in America, More goods moving faster and cheaper in America. More jobs where you can earn a good living in America. Instead of relying on foreign supply chains, let's make it in America.
Or the lower the price of insulin thing.
Let's cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month, so everyone can afford it. And drug companies will do very, very well. Their profit margin.
That second one, by the way, Trump actually did it, and then Biden canceled it, and now Biden's putting it back into place. But no, his remarks in Ukraine, for example, were fine. Well, the content of those remarks anyway. Biden brain was still a factor. He kept stumbling over his words, and at this point I'm half attributing that to his age and half to his lifelong stutter. We've all seen that viral clip of Biden saying Iranian when meaning to say Ukrainian, for example, and how Kamala Harris weirdly mouths the proper word to herself in the background.
Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people. He'll never extinguish their love of freedom.
Or how Nancy Pelosi stood up and rubbed her knuckles together like a goblin, while Biden was talking about people getting cancer from burn pits in Iraq. What the fuck?
Many of you have been there. I've been in and out of Iraq and Afghanistan over 40 times.
Okay, clearly she got up to applaud something that she thought was coming right away, and when it didn't come, she awkwardly sat back down. Look at that face. That's someone who knows she's just made an oopsie. Whoa, 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 don't get up again, Nancy. I thought you learned your lesson the first time. Yes. Yes, this time you should actually get up. Jesus, Nancy Pelosi, what the hell? The years have not been kind to you. But Biden's speech itself, the content, was passable. I think it would have sounded better coming out of a different person's mouth, but fine. The issue at this point is how gamified the whole thing has become. And that's a larger topic because everything is becoming gamified right now. So when people like Lauren Boebert heckle Biden during the State of the Union,
A cancer that would put them in a flag-draped coffin. I know. One of those soldiers was my son, Major Bo Biden.
and then others on social media begin screeching for her resignation. How dare you? I'm just like, okay, yeah, I don't like that shit either. But stop acting like this is somehow new, like it's some unprecedented affront to the office of the presidency. It's not. This is what everybody has turned the State of the Union into. You too. People who want Boibert's head are the same people who were going, yes, Queen Slay, when the squad did it to Trump. Shut the fuck up.